Hello and welcome to our 8th video in our series on the real business cycle model. We are now halfway through the definition of equilibrium. In this video, we're going to be talking about the aggregate supply and how to derive it from the optimal decisions of consumers and firms. The objective is to construct this aggregate supply, that is, how much output is produced at each interest rate. The method we're going to follow is to know that total output, Y, is given by the production function, but Z and K are given in this problem. So in equilibrium, all changes in Y are going to depend on changes in labor. So by finding out how equilibrium labor responds to the interest rate, we can also find out how equilibrium output responds to the interest rate. Remember, the objective is to find a curve that relates changes in interest rates to changes in output supply. Now, to do this, we're gonna note two different things. The first one is that on the labor demand side, the demand is totally given by the marginal productivity of labor. As we discussed in our video on the firm decision problem, this is a completely intratemporal decision. So the interest rate does not affect the level of demand. The labor supply does depend on R. We covered this in our video on the household optimization. We know from that video that an increase in the interest rate increases labor supply. That's because it changes the trade-off between present and future leisure. It is better to work now and save to work less in the future if the interest rate is higher. Now we can see that in a graphical way. So in this graph, we're relating the total amount of labor to the current wage in the market. The labor demand here, it's equal to the marginal rate of substitution, it's equal to the marginal product of labor. The other line, that's the labor supply, that's the one we derive in the consumer's problem, depends on the level of interest rate. Now what we're going to do is that for every interest rate, we can find the value of wages that clears this market and the implied optimal level of labor. So this is going to be equilibrium labor at a given rate R. If you wish, you can think of this N star as N star of R in parentheses right here. Now we can then, using the production function, relate that level of optimal labor to a level of optimal output. Again, this is the level of optimal labor for a given interest rate. Hence, this is the level of output for a given interest rate. The final step in constructing the the output supply, is changing the interest rate, say by increasing the interest rate from R1 to R2, just as in the example in the consumer's problem. That's gonna reduce the equilibrium wages, it's gonna increase the amount of labor, because there is now more labor, there is also more output. And so what we're doing here is we're constructing the equilibrium output supply by changing the interest rate, looking at the changes in the labor market and following the implications of those changes for how much output is supplied in the economy, how much output is produced. The outcome is an upward sloping curve in which higher interest rates give you higher output supply. And the reason you get higher output supply is that consumers are willing to work more as interest rates are going up. Okay, a final thing we can do is to think through what will happen in the event of, say, a higher productivity of the firm. Higher productivity of the firm is going to have two different effects, both of them going in the same direction. The first one is because there is higher productivity of the firm, the marginal product of labor is going to be higher for any given interest rate. Because the marginal product of labor is higher, there is higher demand for labor. So that means that at the same interest rate, equilibrium labor is going to be higher. Wages are going to be higher as well. Because equilibrium labor is higher, there is going to be more output. That's going to be a change over this initial curve. That's a change from this point to this point. But that's not the whole story, because the higher productivity also shifts up the output curve. And so the total effect of this is going to be that for the same interest rate, you get higher labor and then higher output. So when we trace this for all interest rates, what we find is that at any given interest rate, you have more output than before. That's what we're seeing here. At the same interest rate, you have more output. You do this for any interest rate, any horizontal line, that's going to be a shift, an expansion in the overall output supply. And so that's how we can use the results that we derived before for the labor supply of consumers and the labor demand of firms to not only trace the whole aggregate supply of the economy, but also to figure out how it changes, say in the case of higher productivity. In the next video, we're going to do a similar exercise, but now for the aggregate demand of the economy. Thanks.